Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today. Russia's offensive in the Kursk region of Ukraine.
Yeah, it's been all over the news.
Exactly. Russia's saying they're making huge gains, but Ukraine's pushing back hard, reporting really heavy losses. But they say they're going to hold the line. I mean, this could be a turning point in the war, right? Like with global consequences.
Definitely a possibility. And that's why we're taking a deep dive into this, trying to figure out what's really going on.
For sure. And we've got some pretty interesting sources to work with for this one.
Yeah, we do.
We've got CNN reporting directly from Frontline.
Right.
We've also got this leaked audio from a Ukrainian soldier. It's pretty chilling, to be honest. We'll get to that a bit. And then we've got UN reports trying to make sense of the humanitarian situation.
Trying to piece together what they can from the limited information.
Exactly. And then to kind of round things out, we've got some expert predictions. Always interesting to see where they think things are headed.
Always. It can give us a lot to think about. Different scenarios, you know?
Yeah. For sure. So I guess the big question is, why is everyone so focused on Kursk? What makes this particular offensive so important?
Well, first off, Kursk is incredibly strategic. It's basically a crossroads for supplies going to both Kharkiv and the Donbas.
Ah, so if Russia takes Kursk, they can cut off those supply lines.
Exactly. It would put Ukrainian forces in the east in a really tough spot. Isolate them, potentially.
So it's like the whole war hinges on this one place.
In a lot of ways, yeah. It has the potential to change the entire course of the conflict.
And you know what's crazy? I was reading about this, and it turns out that Kursk has a really significant history. Back in World War II, it was the site of the biggest tank battle ever.
The 1943 Battle of Kursk, a major turning point in the war.
Right. I mean, what are the odds that the same region becomes a flashpoint again almost 80 years later?
It's almost eerie, isn't it? Like history's rhyming, if not repeating itself exactly.
So we've got this strategic location, this historical weight hanging over everything, and then you layer on top of that the actual tactics being used on the ground.
Which are surprisingly a mix of old and new. Russia seems to be relying on a very classic Soviet-era approach. Massive artillery bombardments.
Just raining down shells.
Basically.
Yeah.
And then, once they've softened up the defenses, they send in the infantry. It's a brutal tactic, but it's one they've used effectively in the past.
And we're seeing reports of them digging in near Oboyan, creating fortified positions. It's like they're preparing for a long fight.
Absolutely. They're not messing around.
And on the Ukrainian side, I mean, they're facing those overwhelming artillery barrages, right? We have that leaked audio from the Ukrainian soldier, and he paints a pretty bleak picture. He says they're outnumbered 10-1.
We do.
He actually says every day feels like Bakhmut. I mean, that's intense.
It is. It really highlights the challenges they're facing, the sheer intensity of the fighting.
But, and maybe this is a glimmer of hope, Ukraine's not just sitting back and taking it. They're using some pretty advanced technology to fight back.
Oh, yeah. They're getting creative. They're using drones, guided by Starlink, to strike Russian supply lines. And they've also got those HIMARS, the American-supplied rocket systems.
The ones that have been so effective in the past.
Exactly. Those are a game changer. They're mobile, accurate, and they pack a serious punch.
So Ukraine's trying to even the odds with technology.
To some extent, yes. But they've got a major problem. Ammunition. They're running out fast.
Oh, wow. So even with the HIMARS, even with the drones, if they run out of ammo, they're in trouble.
Big trouble. It's a race against time. They need more supplies, and they need them quickly. It's a huge concern.
I mean, just think about it, right? You're a soldier on either side of this conflict. You've got the constant threat of artillery fire.
The psychological toll must be immense.
And then on top of that, you've got these high-tech weapons flying around, these drones appearing out of nowhere.
It's a battlefield like no other. A mix of old-school brutality and cutting-edge technology.
And then there's the impact on the rest of the world, right? This isn't just happening in a vacuum. NATO is feeling the pressure. Big time.
Yeah, absolutely. The alliance is being tested. You've got the U.S. aid facing delays in Congress, which is causing a lot of frustration. And then you've got European countries scrambling to send support.
Like Germany just pledged 10,000 artillery shells.
Right. But the question is it enough? And is it coming too late?
And we're seeing Russia's allies getting involved, too. There are reports of North Korea sending weapons, Iran sending drones.
It's a reminder that this conflict has the potential to draw in actors from all over the world. It's a very dangerous situation with a lot of unknowns.
It really is. And amidst all this, we can't forget about the people caught in the crossfire, the civilians in Kursk. The UN reports are just devastating.
Yeah, it's tough to read those reports. They talk about trapped civilians, shelled safe corridors, hospitals running out of supplies.
We actually have an audio clip from a doctor in Kursk. He's describing what it's like on the ground there. It's pretty intense.
I think it's important that we hear it to really grasp the human cost of this conflict.
All right, let's listen. This is it.
Okay.
This is the audio from that doctor in Kursk. Audio clip of the doctor plays. Oh, man.
It's powerful stuff, right?
It really puts things into perspective when you hear it straight from someone who's living through it. I mean, we talk about the military strategies and all that.
Right.
But it's easy to forget sometimes that there are real people caught in the middle of all this.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the big picture and lose sight of the individual stories, the human cost.
For sure. And this doctor's story, it's just one among thousands, right?
Oh, yeah. We're talking about tens of thousands of refugees fleeing to Lviv, overwhelming the shelters there. And the impact goes even further.
What do you mean?
Think about it. Ukraine's a major grain exporter, right? And those wheat fields in Kursk, they're now battlegrounds. This war is directly affecting global food supplies.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
It's a ripple effect. And it's hitting particularly hard in Africa, where they're already facing a severe hunger crisis.
It's crazy how interconnected everything is.
It really is. What happens in Kursk doesn't stay in Kursk. It has consequences for the whole world.
So, given all this complexity, how do we even begin to make sense of where things are headed?
Well, we can look to those expert predictions we mentioned earlier.
Right? Always helpful to get some outside perspectives.
Exactly. So we've got this military analyst who's been following the conflict very closely. He's saying that Kursk is a real test of Ukraine's resilience.
Okay, so can they hold out against this offensive?
Exactly. And he's saying that if Russia takes Kursk, it could open the door for them to launch another offensive towards Kyiv in the summer.
Another offensive towards Kyiv. That would be
a huge escalation, no question.
So it's all riding on what happens in Kursk over the next few weeks.
Yeah, pretty much. But, and this is important, the analyst also says that Ukraine's use of asymmetric warfare could still change the course of the battle.
Asymmetric warfare, what does that mean?
Think drones, sabotage tactics, that sort of thing. Things that can disrupt Russia's plans, even if they manage to capture Kursk.
So even if they're outgunned, Ukraine could still pull off an upset.
It's definitely possible. They've been very effective with those tactics so far. They've surprised a lot of people.
And we also have that quote from the diplomat, right?
Right. They see things a little differently, more from a political angle.
Okay, so what's their take?
They believe that Putin's using Kursk as leverage. He wants to gain as much ground as possible to strengthen his position before any potential peace talks.
So it's like a bargaining chip for him.
Exactly. He wants to be able to dictate the terms of any agreement.
But Zelenskyy has said he won't negotiate under duress, right?
Yeah, he's made that very clear. He won't be bullied into making concessions.
So I've got this stalemate. Putin wants to control the battlefield to force a negotiation on his terms, and Zelenskyy is refusing to back down.
It's a high-stakes game of chicken, basically.
So, given all that, what are the possible outcomes here? What could happen?
Well, as the military analyst suggested, if Russia takes Kursk and manages to hold it, we could see a renewed push towards Kharkiv.
And that would be bad.
Very bad. It would be a major escalation of the conflict. We could see a massive refugee crisis, even worse disruptions to global food supplies, and the risk of a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia would increase dramatically.
That's a scary thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a scenario everyone wants to avoid.
But what if Ukraine manages to hold the line? What if they push Russia back?
Well, that would be a huge blow to Putin. It would show that Western support is having a real impact and that the Ukrainian resistance is stronger than many anticipated.
It could change the entire trajectory of the war, right?
Potentially, yes. It might even force Putin to rethink his objectives and be more open to genuine negotiations.
It's like everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see what happens in Kursk.
Yeah, it's a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
The stakes are incredibly high.
And while the geopolitical consequences are huge, we have to remember that this isn't just about politics or military strategy.
Absolutely. It's about the people whose lives are being torn apart by this conflict. Their stories are what truly matter.
Their stories are what truly matter. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff, you know? The military strategies, the politics, all of that.
For sure. But it's important to remember that ultimately this war is about people. real people whose lives are being completely upended by this conflict.
Exactly. And one thing that's been really weighing on me is that whole issue of Ukraine's ammunition shortage.
Yeah, that's a major concern.
Even with all the support they're getting from the West, they're burning through ammo at an alarming rate.
It's a huge problem, especially given how heavily Russia's relying on artillery.
So basically, they're just constantly shelling Ukrainian positions.
Pretty much. They've got massive stockpiles of these older Soviet-era artillery shells.
Okay, so they're not the most accurate or the most powerful.
No, but they have a lot of them, and they just keep firing them relentlessly.
So like a war of attrition, just trying to wear each other down.
Exactly. Yeah. But the problem for Ukraine is that they're using more modern, precision-guided munitions.
The kind that NATO countries are supplying.
Right. And those are much more effective, but they're also much more limited in supply.
So even if the West keeps sending weapons, it might not be enough if Ukraine runs out of the specific ammo it needs for those systems.
Exactly. It's a logistical nightmare, and it's a race against time.
So what's the solution? Can NATO countries ramp up production quickly enough to meet Ukraine's needs?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Hmm.
Everyone's talking about increasing production, but these things take time, you know? We're talking about complex supply chains, multiple countries involved.
It's not like flipping a switch.
Exactly. And even if they do manage to increase production, there's the whole issue of getting those supplies into Ukraine.
Yeah, with the borders under constant threat and everything.
It's a massive challenge.
Yeah.
And all of this is happening while Ukraine's economy is in ruins.
I mean, their infrastructure is destroyed, industries have been disrupted, millions of people are displaced.
Rebuilding Ukraine is going to be a monumental task, even if the war were to end tomorrow.
It's hard to even imagine where you would begin.
It's going to require massive financial assistance, expertise in reconstruction, and a long-term commitment from the international community.
So yeah, a monumental task, to say the least. It all feels pretty overwhelming, honestly.
It is a lot to take in.
But I have to ask, amidst all this, is there any room for optimism? Is there any way out of this mess?
Well, as we've been discussing, a lot hinges on the outcome of this battle for Kursk.
Right. If Ukraine can hold the line, it could create an opportunity for negotiations.
Maybe even force Putin to reconsider his objectives.
But Putin seems pretty determined to achieve his goals no matter the cost.
He does.
Mm.
And it's tough to gauge what he's really thinking, what his long-term strategy is.
Like he's playing this high-stakes poker game, and we can't see his cards.
And we don't know what his breaking point is. He's definitely facing pressure at home. The sanctions are hurting, and there's growing discontent among the population.
But he's also shown that he's not afraid to crack down on dissent.
Yeah. So it's hard to predict what he'll do next. It's a very volatile situation.
So we're left with a lot of uncertainty. What can the rest of the world do at this point, besides sending weapons and providing humanitarian aid?
Well, continuing to tighten the sanctions is crucial. The economic pressure is having an effect, and it needs to be maintained.
So make it more and more costly for Russia to continue this war.
Exactly. And diplomatic efforts, even if they seem futile right now, are still important. Keeping those lines of communication open, however tenuous, could be crucial if an opportunity for negotiation arises.
It's like that saying, keep hope alive,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We can't give up on finding a peaceful solution.
This has been a really, really intense deep dive. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole conflict.
It's incredibly complex with so many factors at play,
Yeah,
and it's constantly evolving.
it is. But I think we've managed to shed some light on the key issues, the challenges, and the potential paths forward.
I hope so. It's important to stay informed and engaged, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely. And amidst all the talk of military strategy and geopolitics, we can't forget about the human cost of this war.
The people of Ukraine are showing incredible resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. Their stories deserve to be heard and remembered.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the war in Ukraine. It's been a heavy but important conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a privilege to share my insights and hopefully contribute to a better understanding of this complex situation.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. The future of Ukraine, and perhaps the world, depends on it.